Global Finance, Topic 2, Exchange Rates, Quotes, Transactions, and Appreciations. Copyright Lou Gaddis. In this topic, we're going to talk about how to get exchange rates, how to interpret them, use exchange rates and convert from one currency to another using direct and indirect exchange rates, and compute and interpret currency appreciations and depreciations. So let's start with the role of prices. So right here you have a picture of a Starbucks latte, and the latte costs about $3.30 per latte. All right, so we can quote that price, and we call this a direct price quote, $3.30 per latte. In finance, we would call this a direct quote in US dollars for an American. In other words, it's a dollar price of some commodity. Now, you could take 1 over the $3.30 per latte, and that will give you a number of 0.303 lattes per dollars. In other words, this is a quote that tells you that it will cost $3.30 to buy one latte, but in theory, you can exchange 0.3 lattes for $1 US. So this is the price of one latte. This is the price of $1 quoted in lattes. Now, luckily, lattes are always quoted in direct terms. Here's another commodity called a euro. Say a euro is currently selling for $1.25. So the dollar price of 1 euro is 1.25. That is a direct quote for an American for this commodity called a euro. Now, if I take 1 over the price per euro, I get 0.80 euro per dollar. So we can say that we can buy 1 euro for $1.25, but you can buy $1 for 0.8 euro. Now this quote here, 0.8 euro per dollar, that's an indirect quote for a euro for an American. Several currencies are quoted in direct terms, namely the big ones are the euro and the British pound. Here's another commodity, a Danish crown, or Danish kroner, or krone. So a Danish crown is currently selling for about 16 cents per crown. This is a direct quote for an American for a crown. Now, if I take 1 over the price per crown, I get 6.25 crown per dollar. In other words, the price of 1 crown is 16 cents, and the price of $1, if you exchange it for crown, is 6.25 crown. This is an indirect quote for a crown for an American. Unfortunately, most currencies are quoted in indirect terms, which causes all kinds of trouble. So, for example, the Japanese yen, Swiss franc, Canadian dollar, Chinese yuan, Mexican peso, and many, many more are quoted in indirect terms. Now, if we look at currencies around the world and just look at symbols, we know the US dollar uses this dollar sign, right? The S with a line through it. And the Brazilian real also uses that dollar sign, and the Canadian dollar uses that dollar sign, and the Aussie dollar uses that dollar sign. So there's a lot of currencies that use dollar signs. And you can see other major currencies are the Chinese yuan, Russian ruble, the euro, kroner, Mexican peso, Argentine peso, and so on. The problem with using symbols to represent currencies is that many symbols are used for many currencies. So the dollar sign could refer to the Canadian, the Aussie dollar, the Brazilian real, and so on. So in finance, we use 3-digit ISO codes, or SWIFT codes. So every currency has a 3-character code. So the US dollar is USD, the euro is EUR, the British pound is GBP, the Australian dollar is AUD, Japanese yen, JPY, Chinese yuan, CNY, and so on. So every currency has a 3-digit or 3-character code. Now the problem is when you represent a currency price, you have to put 2 codes down. So for example, what if you ask somebody, hey, what's the price of a euro? Well, if you're asking an American, they might say, well, it's it's about $1.25 per euro. But what if you ask someone from Japan. Well, they might have to quote you the yen price of a euro, or someone in Switzerland, they might give you the Swiss franc price of a euro. So whenever you ask for a price of a currency, you have to tell two codes. I want the dollar price of a euro. And how we write that using Swift codes is you first write down what we call the base code. This is the currency you're about to get a price of. Then you have to write, well, what is the quoted currency? And I'm going to quote it in USD. So you can see here from Bloomberg.com in their currency section, they say the EUR USD is selling for $1.30. So how I interpret that, it's the dollar price of a euro. And the next one is the dollar price of the British pound. So it's $1.52 per 1 British pound. Now, again, these are called direct quotes for an American, the US dollar price of foreign currencies. Now, on this page, the only ones that are quoted directly for Americans are the dollar, the pound, and if we come over here, this is the Australian dollar, so it's 90 cents per Australian dollar, and this is the price of a New Zealand dollar, also called a Kiwi. So these are only direct quotes. This is the prices of US dollars in foreign terms. I'm sorry, the dollar prices of the foreign currencies. Notice all the other currencies start with USD. That means you're getting the Swiss franc price of 1 US dollar, the Swedish kroner price of 1 US dollar, the Danish kroner price of 1 US dollar, the Polish zloty price of $1, the Hungarian forint price of $1, the Russian ruble price of $1, and so on. And this one here would be, say, the Japanese yen price of $1 and the Hong Kong dollar price of $1. So again, we call these currencies direct quotes. For Americans, it's a dollar price of a good, but all the other ones are in indirect terms. And how you always read them. So for example, the dollar price of a euro would always be written, say, EUR USD, or sometimes EUR/USD, or sometimes EUR-USD. All those mean it's the dollar price of the euro. Similar on actual Bloomberg terminals, you also see that here's the Hong Kong price of 1 US dollar, the dollar price of a pound, the dollar price of a euro, dollar price of a New Zealand dollar, and so on. Here's the Japanese yen price of 1 US dollar. So to interpret exchange rates, you have to have the codes, and you have to know, is it the, in case of the euro, is it the euro price of the dollar or the dollar price of the euro? So if you're doing, say, the dollar price of a euro, you would write it EUR USD. If you're given, say, the euro price of a dollar, that would be the USD EUR. So let's talk about conversions. Say that the USD CAD exchange rate is 105. Now you know that this is the Canadian dollar price of 1 US dollar. So that price is 105 Canadian per 1 US dollar. So how many CAD can you exchange for 100 US dollars? Well, let's write down $100, and what we want to convert it to is Canadian. So to go from dollars to Canadian, I need an exchange rate, an exchange ratio. In order for a cross multiplication to work, I need the Canadian dollar price of 1 US dollar, so the dollars will cancel out and the Canadian will go further. So I need the Canadian dollar price of a dollar, which is 105. So I just multiply it to 100 times 105. Now, if the question asks how many US dollar can you get for 100 Canadian, I'd write down I have 100 Canadian and I want to get US dollar. The ratio I need are dollars over Canadian, so the Canadian cancel out and the dollars go forward. So I need a dollar per Canadian exchange rate. This is a Canadian per dollar exchange rate, so I got to flip it, 1 over 105. So I can exchange 100 Canadian for 95 US, or I can exchange 100 US for 105 Canadian. So here's some practice. Suppose the yen indirect quote for an American is 78 yen per US dollar. How many dollars can you exchange for 10,000 yen? So if you want to pause and work on this, you can now. I'll show you the solution now. If you have 10,000 yen, you can convert that to dollars by using a ratio of dollar over yen. However, this is a yen over dollar exchange rate. So I need to flip this to make it a dollar over yen exchange rate. The yen cancel out, the dollar goes forward, and you get 128.21. Likewise, the pound is selling for $1.55. So what that means is $1.55 per pound. How many pounds can you exchange for $10,000? I'll solve that now. $10,000, I need a pound per dollar exchange rate. So the dollars cancel out and I get pounds. This is a dollar pound exchange rate. I need a pound dollar exchange rate. So in this one, I'm going to have to flip this one also. And my answer is 6451. So to do currency conversions, write down the currency you know about, figure out what exchange rate you need for the cross multiplication to work, compare it to the exchange rate you're given, and you may or may not have to flip it. Let's talk about currency appreciations for a minute. If you want to see how much one currency appreciated in terms of another, you can use the percent change formula, which you take a new price, say the price in period 1, minus an old price over an old price. That's just your basic percent change formula. The problem with using percent change formula in a currency is there's always two currencies, right? If you talk about, say the euro selling for $1.50 per euro, and it goes to $1.65. Well, if I do a percent change, am I talking about the appreciation of the euro or the dollar? Well, you can think about this. This exchange rate, say $1.50 per euro, that is the price of a euro. Therefore, if I take the percent change formula, it'll tell me the appreciation of the euro. If I want to get the appreciation of the dollar, I'm going to have to convert these exchange rates and make them euro price of $1. So I can invert both of them. Take, say, 1 over the new value minus 1 over the old value over 1 over the old value. Therefore, it's the euro price of $1, and do a percent change. Now, it just so happens that mathematically, that's the same thing as taking the old minus the new over the new exchange rate. So when you use the percent change formula for exchange rates, it always tells you about the denominator or base currency. So that's the appreciation. When I say appreciation, negative appreciations are depreciation, so I just use the word depreciation. That's the appreciation of the base, or I'll call it the denominator currency. If I use old minus new over new exchange rates, that's going to tell me the appreciation of the numerator currency, or the quote currency. So here's some examples. The euro goes from $1.50 to $1.65. That is the price of 1 euro. So if I use new minus old over old, here's my new value, here's my old value. That tells me the euro appreciated 10%. So if I'm traveling to Paris and the quoted price of my hotel in euro is the same, that's going to cost me 10% more to buy those euros, so that price of that hotel in Paris just went up 10%. However, you may be asked, well, what was the appreciation of the dollar? So for a Parisian coming to New York, how much cheaper are their hotels? Well, if the exchange rate goes from 165 to 150, I could convert all the exchange rates to be a euro price of $1. and do a percent change formula. So if I convert these to euro over dollar and do new minus old over old, so 1 over 165 over 1 over 150 over 1 over 150, you'll see that the euro devalued 9%. But mathematically, it just luckily happens that if you take old minus new over new, kind of what you generally don't do for a percent change formula, that'll give you the same value. So that's easy. That's the shortcut. Now the reason why, if one currency is up, the other one is always down. So if one currency appreciated, the other one depreciated, and they're usually pretty close. Plus 10, minus 9, but it's never exact. It has to do with ratios, right? The problem is if, say, if you just look on a number line and say a value went from the number 3 to 1, 4 and calculate a percent change, that's not going to be the exact percent change if a number went from 1/3 to 1/4. And that's why these things aren't the exact numbers, but just changing the sign. So here's an example. Say the US dollar CAD exchange rate, CAD per dollar, US dollar, went from 105 to 103. So this is my new value, this is my old value. This is the price of a US dollar. So if I take new minus old over old, it tells me what happened to the denominator currency, the base currency. So in this case, the dollar depreciated 1.905%. If you want to know the appreciation of the Canadian dollar, I would take old minus new over new and see the Canadian dollar is up 1.94% against the dollar, but the US dollar is down 1.905% against the Canadian dollar. So here's a practice problem for that. We'll start from the beginning. Say you hear the yen quote in America goes from 95 to 85 yen. Now what's missing here, this is the yen price of 1 US dollar. So I'll just fill that in. So what you see is the dollar has gone from 95 to 85, or the indirect quote of the yen went from 95 to 85. But let's answer the question, what was the appreciation of the dollar and the yen? I'm going to go in a few steps. First, when you look at this quote, you first have to recognize that even though we call this the indirect quote of the yen, or a quote for the yen for an American, the reality is it's actually a price of a dollar. It's the yen price of a dollar. So this 95 quote is really the price of a US dollar quoted in yen. So when you see that the exchange rate went down, what went down is the dollar. The dollar is down, that means the yen is up. Now, if you want what happened to the dollar, what was the appreciation of the dollar? Since that's in the denominator, you can just do new minus old over old. So I can take 85 minus 95 over 95, and what you see is the dollar is down 10.53%. Now, the appreciation of the yen, since the yen's up top here, right? This is not the dollar price of the yen, it's the yen price of the dollar. I'll take old minus new over new. That'll tell me what happened to the yen. So you have to be careful when you look at exchange rates or calculate appreciations, what the terms are. Is it the yen price of the dollar or the dollar price of the yen? One last problem. Say the Danish krone euro exchange rate goes from 425 to 450. Now notice I just wrote here the krone euro exchange rate. I'm not using this DKK EUR or the EUR DKK. And this you'll find in literature all the time. People just talk about the krone euro exchange rate or the euro krone exchange rate. But the exchange rate was quoted as krone, 425 to 450. So what that implies, it's actually krone per price of euro, for a unit of euro. So it's actually the price of the euro. So what this exchange rate really is, it's the crown price of a euro, the Danish crown price of a euro. So what we can do is calculate, well, what was the appreciation of in this case, the euro? What was the appreciation of the crown? And it says against the euro because it's implied, right? If the exchange rate is crown per euro, and someone said, what was the appreciation of the crown? It must be against the euro. But sometimes I'll write that, against the euro. But I'm really looking at what happened to the price of the crown. Now this problem is a little bit different because if you really wanted to know what was the appreciation of the crown, you'd really want to know euro per crown exchange rates. So if I did a new minus old over old on this, it's going to tell me what happened to the euro, the denominator currency. So on this problem, since we are given crown per euro, old, new, and we're asked to calculate the appreciation of the crown, I'm going to use old minus new over new. And I get negative 5.56%. Now one way it might help you is actually guess the sign before you do a problem like this. If I see that the price of a euro, which this is, went from 425 to 450, what I can automatically see is the euro's up and the crown's down. So I knew it couldn't be A or C, just recognizing that the euro appreciated from 425 crown to 450. So in this topic, we talked about how to obtain and interpret exchange rates, convert currencies, and compute currency appreciations and depreciations.